if you're making the customer happy and they're loving what you have and what you've created, they're going to tell other people. And that is the best marketing that you can do.
You're listening to the 7-Figure Leap podcast. We're here to leverage rich relationships and smart strategies to take your business to the next level. Here's your host, Dustin Riekman.
Welcome back to the 7-Figure Leap podcast. I have a really cool guest today. Karl Staib and I met at a dinner at Craft and Commerce way back in June. And I think we ended up sitting next to each other. We immediately hit it off. And as you're going to hear from Karl, he has a very operational, systematic mind. And as more of a visionary guy, I find that fascinating. And so as we got to talking about his story and some of the breakthroughs he's had in building his own business while maintaining a very demanding and successful day job, I was like, this is something we should have on the podcast. So Karl, thanks so much for being here. It's really a pleasure to get behind the mic and be able to unpack your story today. Yeah, absolutely. So I usually like to dig in here a little bit and just understand kind of like what makes Karl tick. And so a lot of times we'll go back maybe into your history. Could be, as a kid, it could be in college, it could be in your career. There's usually some point though where you're like, I want to have my own business, right? And as you might know, I was an engineer. I had a whole career, and I had a few different bites at that apple of this entrepreneurial bug that was coming up, and a few different ways I tried to address that. So I'd love for you to just kind of take us back to wherever you feel is appropriate to kind of like start forming this identity and like, why does Karl love systems and why do you have your own business?
Yeah. Man, starting my own business goes back to probably, I used to always try to figure out how to make money. I lived out in the country and there was not an easy way to have a job. I didn't have a part-time job until I was 16. I worked with my dad, who was an entrepreneur, and he was an electrician. So I used to earn money that way. But I knew that being an electrician was not in my future. It wasn't who I wanted to be or who I thought I was. And the second phase of that was I started a mushroom monger company in college. So my dad's German, as you can probably tell by my last name.
Yeah, say your last name the right way. I just Americanized it. So
Staib.
All right, like Riekman. All right, two German guys here. So all right.
His dad found a mushroom called the chanterelle, and that grew in my parents' basically backyard. Kind of live on a country road. It was dirt until I was probably like 10 years old or so. And I picked these mushrooms, and I just had the idea because my dad one time took him to a restaurant and he got a gift card. And I was like, well, if he can get a gift card, I can get money. So
I love it.
I was like, okay, what I'll do is I'll pick them. I'll go out, and I sold them for $10 a pound. And this was, 25 years ago, 27 years ago now. And I went to restaurants with this just bucket of dirty mushrooms and said, hey, would you want some chanterelles for your, guest tonight? And most chefs were like, yes. And that was like, okay, I'm providing a service for these chefs. They didn't have to go out and get it, fresh mushrooms. And I get there's no intermediary. It's basically just perfect mushrooms for them. And so that was okay, this is something I want to do more of. But I had a marketing degree, went out into the workforce, and over time and many years, starting different businesses and iterating on them, that's where I'm at now. Because I'm like, okay, look at my journey, and I'm starting to see that path. And to me, what's really important is takeaway is, as people are doing these things, look at where their strengths are. Where are you able to do things that other people can't do? And to me, that's why it's important to notice those things and document them, because, as you see these patterns come up, that's the stuff that is gold and you can really use.
That's awesome. So a few themes there. So kind of like me, I grew up very isolated out in the country and was always like looking to make a buck, right? Because like there was no paper routes, there was no like traditional kid jobs, So I totally get that, respect that. So you started with this mushroom business as sort of your first entrepreneurial adventure. I think it might be helpful. I mean, we can make this a quick recap, but you have a marketing degree. Maybe we can talk a little about your quote unquote professional career, your day job career. And then maybe we can go back and start paralleling that with different businesses you've started. And of course, we'll work up to what you actually do today with Systematic Leader. But do you want to tell us a little more about your professional background?
Yeah. So, marketing degree, got a marketing coordinator position out of college. Didn't really like it that much. I am okay at marketing, but it's not a strength. And it's funny, looking back, I got a degree in it and I'm not very good at it. I am not very good at marketing my own company. So that's a little side topic too. But over time, like I talked about, is finding these patterns, because that to me is something that any good career, anybody who is navigating their career, whether it be a side hustle or whether it be a full-time business, you have to look at where your strengths are and how to use them. So I started a business back in, I'm showing my age now, 2008, and it's called Work Happy Now. I have done a lot of work with yoga, meditation, a lot of study around happiness, gratitude. And what I realized, though, is Work Happy Now was a really bad business, especially in America.
Yeah,
people really don't care.
We just want to work. Yeah,
right. And it's changed so much. And this was back in 2008, though. This is almost 20 years ago. Like, trying to get a job and trying to be a consultant, trying to teach people about the importance of work happiness was hard, and most people didn't. I had one a workshop I did. It was in Michigan. I remember it very vividly because Flint River, Michigan. They had the poisoning of their water system. Well, the EMT group brought me in, or the leader brought me in to speak to this EMT group. And it was a disaster. One guy came up to me and was like, "You're not the first guy they brought in. You're not going to be the last guy they brought in." And I was like, "Oh my God, what did I get myself into?" So that's when, talk about iteration, talk about understanding what patterns, what's working, what does the market want. So I got laid off from my job as in marketing for a credit union. And then I started a agency, basically a marketing agency. And like I said, I'm not very good at marketing, but I was like, I need to provide for my family. But that helped me develop so many skills, from design to sales, and just help really strengthen a large part of my business acumen. And so through that, I realized, okay, what do I want? And so I actually partnered with somebody who had, they trained coaches. And so I helped him with the training of, trying to train life coaches. And so that was fascinating. And I was doing that while I was doing my agency, which then led to a Fortune 100 company saying, "Hey, we're looking for people with your type of talent that can design," because I did a lot of websites, landing pages. And so that was back in 2016. And I've been there ever since. But I've always had the itch to have my own company. So I took a break. I wrote a book called Bring Gratitude, trying to teach people about the importance of appreciating people as from a leadership perspective, appreciating people. And here's a cool fact: So if I show appreciation to an employee 6 times and I give one negative comment, they will still have a positive reaction. They'll increase their work by 30%. Now, if it's 3-1, so in most people, it's probably managers, it's like maybe 2-1, maybe. We always overestimate as leaders how much appreciation we show other people. But if it's 3-1, it's flatline. If it's anything under that, you are basically creating not a toxic, but not a very good culture that encourages people to work. And so that was that iteration of, okay, and how people need to show more appreciation, which led to a podcast called Dig to Fly, which was helping teach people how to coach other people because of everything I learned previously, which then led to Systematic Leader. And so been helping people with systems since 2019. So, and probably before that, really, with all the other work I've been doing, but really trying to help them understand how they are looking at their systems, how they can become more efficient, but also magnetic. And what I mean by magnetic is something people want to do, people want to use. And that's the hardest part about designing systems.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, man. So much there to sort of like reflect on and unpack. There's like this mix of an entrepreneurial bug, marketing, kind of realizing marketing wasn't like your thing, but then through the course of the market and, being laid off, you're like, I can do a marketing agency, which maybe wasn't your ultimate calling, but in doing that, you forced yourself to learn a lot of new skills. And what's interesting is those skills then led to a really great Fortune 100, professional career. And it sounds like you kind of, even though you always had this passion for mindfulness and gratitude and these sort of like soft skills that you tried to start a business for, and you kind of found, especially maybe Americans and in this period of the last 20 years weren't like craving, or it wasn't like the pain point people were looking to solve. You've continued to evolve, right? And so, and that design skill that you sort of like taught yourself in order to work with the life coaching company and build your own agency now has, flourished into a career. And then it sounds like you took other skill sets to create Systematic Leader. So is that a decent recap of sort of like this process? Because I think you're such a process oriented guy, and you mentioned like signals and like being able to pick up what's working and put down maybe what people aren't. And in marketing, we talk a lot about like selling people what they want and giving them what they need. So I assume that that's part of your story too, is like figuring out finally, like, what do people actually want to pay me for? I can still deliver the gratitude and the holistic sort of like things I believe in, but that's not what they're looking to buy. Is that a pretty good summary?
That's a very good summary. Yeah, exactly. Because I think, and to your point of, we talked about it before we hit record, understanding your lighthouse, like where is working and what isn't. And that's, to me, is where systems come in. And I've done a lot of studying of around Toyota and their constant improvement. They use the word Kaizen. And I think this is where a lot of companies can really improve and really, I guess, multiply their business if they have these systems in place to review their work, review what's working, and to your point, what's not. Because if you put that focus, that energy into, let's say YouTube, and it's not working very well, you're draining your energy from things that can work well. And I see this again and again in so many clients. They want something to work, or they think something should work. And instead of having this system or process to review and work through these things, they kind of butt their heads against the wall, and eventually they burn out, or eventually they learn their lesson. But they could have done it months, years before that if they had these systems in place.
Yeah, guilty as charged. So let's talk more about Systematic Leader and what you do today in your business. Like who's your who? Like, who do you typically love to work with? Like, where would you meet someone in their journey that you're like, man, I could really help you? Like, tell us a little bit about like, where people find you and the work that you just really are fired up to help people with.
Yeah, I find a lot of family businesses. I think they need a lot of support and systems. A lot of it's stuck in people's heads. And because of that, the communication breaks down inside of a company. And it doesn't have to be huge. It can be, 6, 7 people. It can be, 25 people. But what ends up happening is people, if they do go away, or if whoever goes on vacation, things fall apart and people can't keep up. People don't know what's going on. It's because these systems have been put in place. I'm a big advocate for SOPs, standard operating procedures. And it seems very tedious, and it can seem sometimes superfluous to like have to document what I'm doing. Like, it's not hard. People should know how to do this. It's like, upload the blog post, publish it, add an image. But what ends up happening is you see it from your own perspective, and other people don't see it from that perspective. And so they don't know what to do. You are, kind of at wit's end because you can't take a vacation as a business owner or as a leader because you don't feel comfortable enough. And that's where system documentation is so important.
Okay. So is that, tell us about like a typical deliverable. Are you coming in and like talking to a key leader in one of these companies, maybe the founder? I mean, I get this sense, because this is a process I've been through myself, where there's this sort of catharsis where I have to get everything out of my head and then have someone like a Karl who can see it, move the pieces around, put it back into an actual system, and then install it in my business so that it's no longer just in my head. Is that sort of like a thing that you love to help businesses with? Am I putting my finger on sort of the deliverable that you like to provide?
Yeah. So I think, let me give you a little story. So I was helping out a client, and they had digital products. And so what ended up happening was they realized something was wrong, and something, like there was just a lot of friction inside their company. And we all have friction, but the idea is to help expose it and notice it, and then be able to start making tweaks so it doesn't keep rubbing people and causing issues with customers and with employees. And so, what you usually do, to your point, is you start with an assessment. You look at what's working, what's not inside of a company. Where are the friction points? Where is it really holding back the value? And so, what I found with this woman is, she had so many great products, too many, right? And so, but what ended up happening is, once people did choose, that onboarding process was so antiquated and old because she had so many products. It was hard to keep track of them all. And so people would complain. So what we did was we created a little survey for people who were onboarding, and we started gathering data. And this is a really important part of creating systems, is not just to do like what I think needs to be done. You're trying to create this lighthouse structure. So as employees are looking and they're or going through your course, you're finding out what's causing that friction for them. One for her was the course took too long. They weren't sure where to ask questions. Was it in the Q&A? Was it in the membership group? The length of the modules. And so what we did is then we looked at all these things, and you start to say, well, we can't tackle all of them. And this is where most people often just give up, or they just pick one. Instead, what you got to do is you really have to take a step back, and it doesn't take long. And this is what I love doing, is that you start gathering the data, synthesize through it, and you realize like it just takes some time, some questions, right? Some really thoughtful questions of like, okay, what's driving the most value? What's not? And then what ends up happening is you start to be able to prioritize, and then you can say, okay, this is the most important part. And it's, this course, the modules are taking too long. Let's shorten them because people are busy. It was for, people who are, high up in their careers. They didn't have time to watch like a 30-minute video. So we started chunking it down and breaking it up. And it created such a better experience. And she got more referrals because of it. And that is the beauty of having these systems and being able to track that stuff. and then be able to synthesize through it. And to your point of like, you just making sure that you have that ability to look at that stuff and not just guess, because that's what so many entrepreneurs do. And it's really just giving them the tools to do that.
Okay. No, yeah, that's a really good practical example. I've been through a lot of this. I've talked about it with other guests and on other episodes, but this year for me, I was like, I'm a sales and marketing guy, kind of a visionary, kind of ran my whole business on Post-it notes. I mean, grew a 7-figure business that way, but it was maddening. And so my symptoms, I like to talk a lot about like, what's the symptoms that are going to make people raise their hand and be like, I need help. So my symptoms were sort of like this tension in my brain of like, there's way too much in here and I'm going to forget something, and realizing there's people falling through the cracks that I could be helping better, either by enrolling them in a program or fulfilling better, to your point, or improving referrals because we've improved the user experience, making it very clear what the process is for clients, onboarding, fulfillment, offboarding. So this is all like fresh wounds for me, but things I've addressed this year, and it's made a huge, huge difference. So tons of value in it. And I think it's so helpful for a lot of entrepreneurs tend to be more visionary, and they're just constantly going and pursuing the next idea. And they don't take that time to think systematically or document or think about if they're, where can they be in more of their unique ability, and maybe hire a team member to help or a part-time contractor to help. So I love that you're able to step in and help people see and then actually implement these things that we sort of, we'll gloss over if we're left to our own devices. And so as the symptoms for that client and clients in general, sounds like customer service was a big one. Like they're hearing complaints, they're getting a lot of questions. They're maybe like noticing there's a lack of referrals, and like people aren't really satisfied, but they don't really have their finger on like what's going on and why that is. Is that typically where people would reach out to Karl and be like, something's broke, I can't identify it, but I need someone to come in and help me fix it?
Yeah, exactly. And most of that stuff is from an operations perspective, because once you get, and this is, I think, hard, is it's easy to hire somebody to help you bring in more clients or more leads. But when you do that, things are broken on the inside, it just makes everything harder. So you just keep throwing, oil on top of the fire, and it gets worse. And that's where I come in and help them. Because, and maybe even back up a little bit, is really having a system around mission, vision, and values, and sharing that with your team, and having that ability to make decisions based off of those values. And what I also find too, so I just did a workshop with a law firm, and they didn't have anything documented, mission, vision, or values. And we documented the vision, the mission, and the vision. And we did a workshop including their people to do core values. And then we came away with 6 core values that the whole team could get behind. And it's so powerful because people are engaged, and they're like, it was funny because one of the, owners said, "Oh, this person's a troublemaker, and she's probably going to give you trouble." And she was fantastic. And the key part is making sure they're giving the feedback. You're not telling them what to do or what to say. It's them, and just, pulling it out of them, because at first people are always a little reticent, but then over time they start to open up. And that, to me, is that foundation. So you lay the foundation, and then you can start putting up the pillars of support and, finding those other issues like onboarding and all that other stuff.
Yeah, that's also, something I've experienced, like, sort of having inherent values. Like, I know how I want to do things. I know how I want to treat people. I know the types of people I like to work with and who really fires me up, who gives me energy. But then, I went to hire some team members, and I wasn't articulating that because I'd never articulated it to myself. I'd never documented it. And so part of that process, which you help people with too, once I got the values laid out, they're not only on my website for clients to see, but they're on the top of my job applications or my job postings, right? So it's you need to resonate with this in order to fit in here. I'm talking, it's me and I have one full-time employee and some contractors, but even at that scale, so vital to have everyone know like, what are we about? Like how do we treat people? And we have a filter or a value system in which to do that. And that also helps with hiring the new team members. It helps with like the onboarding into our community. Like now, if you're a client and you come in, you're like, for one, before you buy, you should know these are our values. But then once you're in your community, you know how to behave, you know how to treat people, without having a bunch of rules. It's like, no, these are our values. And if you stick to these values, you're going to excel in here because this is the values of everyone in here. Right. So I love that. And I will say I'm the first one. If you went back 2 years ago, for sure, even a year ago, I would have been like, mission statements, core values, like, oh, gag me, like that's why I left my engineering career. That's why I left corporate America. And so I was very like resistant to that. But then once I was like, no, I can see like this is actually to my benefit to articulate this because it's going to make my life way easier and it's going to make me happier. And so I love that. And the last thing I want to talk about, like how systems play in, I feel like I have to say Nathan Barry's name because, that's where we met was Crafting Commerce, which was ConvertKit's conference. And of course, he talks a lot about flywheels. So as you're talking about, customer feedback and then improving their experience, which leads to new referrals. And I would assume too, as they're going through, say, this woman's course, having a constant feedback loop constantly makes the course better. And then that makes people happier, which makes them refer people. And so we actually can create a virtuous kind of flywheel effect by having systems. But if you don't have a system, you can't have a flywheel, right? And I know you know about flywheel. So tell me a little bit about how you see your work in the context of building an effective flywheel for someone's business.
Yeah. And you're right. Because if you are constantly recreating the wheel again and again, it's exhausting. And I think as entrepreneurs, we like novelty, we like shiny things, we like new things and possibility of things. And it gets us distracted. And that's where systems are so important, is kind of bringing you back to what is the value that's really driving your company and keeping it focused on that. Because if you don't have that system in place, you're going to try to spin other flywheels and try to get those up and running, and you don't have enough energy to do all that. And so it's really understanding, how you can, like I said, have that lighthouse. Where is there friction? And it really starts with the customer, right? Like if you're making the customer happy and they're loving what you have and what you've created, they're going to tell other people. And that is the best marketing that you can do. And we talked about, investing before we hit record. And, because my side hustle, a lot of times I'll invest my money and I put it a lot of times into Bitcoin. And the reason that I do that is because of the community that encourages more people to buy Bitcoin. And the funny thing is no one owns Bitcoin. It is a decentralized asset that just sits on the blockchain. And if people want it, the price goes up. If people don't want it, the price goes down. But because so many people believe in it, it goes up and up and up. And now I have some because I'm like, well, I have to get on this ride, right? And the same thing happens inside a company, right? If you're doing great work and other people are telling people about your work, now this is not easy. It is not easy to put these systems in place. It's hard to take the time and slow down. And I try to tell people a lot of the systems should be either like quarterly or biweekly. And then you should also have a monthly and a quarterly and a yearly. So if you're coming back to core values, I would eventually, as you grow, bring in your team and say, hey, these are core values. Like, how do you feel about them? Is there anything we should adjust? Anything we should add? And it makes it dynamic and flexible instead of like, hey, these are the core values we've had since, 2015. And people, as they're onboarded, that's good. But if you bring them along for the ride, it makes it so much better. Having a system like that in place, all these little flywheels. And I know we're talking about a lot of different types of systems. The key part to all this is to really start with one. Like, you have so much on your plate as an entrepreneur. You've got marketing, you've got operations, you've got accounting, you've got, maybe mentorship, maybe you mentor whatever. You've got memberships groups or sites. And you have your social media that you're trying to feed on a daily basis or regular basis. You can't do it all. And so, but the idea is to really understand where the top friction is. And sometimes it's good to have surveys, but I also suggest to people to interview, because it helps strengthen the empathy muscle. And so I often will help clients craft interview guides and have them interview. I've done interviews for them, but I really prefer if they do it, because you get to hear what's going on. I'll record it and I'll share it with them, but they're so busy they a lot of times don't listen to them. So if they actually do it and record it, and I did a interview with Tim Grahl, who was also at Craft and Commerce, and he interviewed 550 people. And what that did is that helped his marketing flywheel, because he realized he was saying the wrong things to the people that he really wanted to reach. Like, so he helps authors. And he was like talking about being a bestseller, and nobody wanted to be a bestseller on his email list. So he was saying all these things thinking that's what they wanted. But the reality is they just wanted to make an impact. They just wanted to leave a legacy. So he started shifting his marketing message to that, and everything got easier for him. It's because you have these systems in place. And so that's often what I suggest. Start with a survey, because it's the easiest, and you start to see some cracks in your foundation a little bit, or in your pillars. And then you can start to say, okay, I'm starting to see some patterns. Let me dig deeper. And this is where I think a lot of, especially small business owners with a small team, really don't think they have time to interview their customers. But my thing is, you don't not have time to interview your customers. You should, that should become part of your regular process. Like, if you can, talk to one customer a month, just one a month for 30 minutes. Do that 12 times a year, and it will change how you run your business.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That was perfect kind of summation, because what I heard in that too is not only the practical value to improving your business by interviewing people, learning what makes them what they really care about, what they're struggling with, having the empathy, but kind of going back to your origin story of gratitude. That, like, you've basically, what you described there in a bigger sense is putting systems into your business that make you more empathetic and show more gratitude to your customers and to your team members, right? Because while we all would probably say we have that intention, like, yeah, of course I want my customers to be happy, and I do want to understand it. The capitalist pig side of this is also served, because you're going to have a much better business, happier customers. They're going to spend more money with you. They're going to refer people to you when they feel understood, when you're speaking their language. It's really hard to guess at that. And so, like Tim's a very successful author, very successful coach. And it's really cool. That's a really good example of when he actually took the time. He did it to an extreme, like he tends to do. In interviews, 500 clients, his whole messaging changed, right? Like, the whole premise of why people would purchase something from him was like, I got to imagine it's like a light bulb moment. So that's really cool. Like, talking about like systems, a lot of times to me can sound sort of dry and sort of like boring. But the marketer in me like really lit up, because you're like, if you had a system for communicating better with your clients, understanding what they really want, like, how much easier would your business be? And it's like, yeah, like, that's the ultimate way to fuel the flywheel, is with the customer juice, right? And like, be able to understand and name that. So that's really, really cool. Well, Karl, I know we're gonna wrap up here shortly. You mentioned the word Lighthouse. I'd love to just kind of turn it over to you, and any gaps you want to fill in, or if there's like a process around that. But like, what do you mean by a lighthouse, and what can we do as entrepreneurs once we identify this lighthouse?
Yeah, I think often there are so many, we talk about shiny objects. There's so many things that entrepreneurs do well. Like, the people who are listening are probably in the top 5% of people from an intelligence, from an energy standpoint. A lot of people don't start businesses because they don't have the energy to do it. Like we said, I do this as a side hustle, and it's a lot. But because of the systems I put in place, it allows me to know when to say when to pull back, when to lean in and do a little bit more, try new things. And because of that, I think I have basically a lighthouse so I don't crash. If my energy's fading, I turn on that lighthouse and I'm like, oh, here comes the rocks, right? And so we have to create these systems inside of our own business that allow us to catch these things, catch these mistakes before they become big problems. It could be an employee issues. People are leaving the company faster than you would like. People are, not showing not bringing their full self to work. Customers are not referring you. All these different things you have to be able to say, okay, I'm noticing this thing. Let's find out why. Let's dig deeper. And that's why I say suggest with surveys and then dig deeper with interviews. But the key part is there's feedback mechanisms happening all the time. We're seeing, when a client, doesn't return our call right away like they used to. Now, it could mean that they're just busy, but that's also these little signals that, okay, let me check in with them. Now, we're very tuned into that because, we know if client's happy, they're going to keep paying us and we're doing a good job. But there's these softer signals that we have to be aware of. And I want right now the people who are listening is what soft signals can you start to put out there? These little lighthouses that you can put out there so you don't crash into the rocks. Could be a survey. It could be, asking people in a group, hey, I'm curious about this thing. And, for people who are, trying to get the 7 figures, the key thing is listening. And in this fast-paced world, we don't do a great job of listening to our customers or our employees. And that's why systems are so important, because it forces us to actually do it. And then once we do, it's like when you finally get the guts up to ask that girl on the date and she says yes, and you're like, why'd I wait so long? It was there all along for the past 6 months. And if I just would have taken action sooner, we would have gone on a date sooner. And I think the same thing happens in our business too.
Yeah, like I said, I'm just like right with you on this. I run a mastermind group, the 7-Figure Leap Mastermind. We've got over 20 members in there. It's been going for like 18 months. And if for some reason, some signal that I wasn't looking for, but I was like, man, there's something under the surface here. So I took one of our sessions. I said, hey guys, like instead of hot seats today, if you'll indulge me, I just want to basically listen to you. And so we did a SWOT analysis, so, from the corporate world, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And it was very informal, by that standard, but it was so useful. And so, 90% of the feedback was, this is awesome. Like, I love the people, I love the culture, but they started to name the things they actually care about. And some of those were obvious to me. And some of those I'm like, really? Like emotional support? Like that's why you come to these calls, And so that made me, I literally yesterday re-recorded sort of the overview video of what we're about. And I was able to say, here's what the members say, here's what they care about. And in the opportunity side of thing, it was like, Dustin, like you do a good job. We always get value, but like we could use a little more structure, and I'm like, okay. And I think that's what I was feeling. I'm like, I feel like we're a little unstructured. And so, I won't take the whole rest of our time, but the end of this story is not only did I create a better structure for the mastermind, so we have monthly themes to our meetings, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, like this would work for our whole community, not just the mastermind. And so we've had 2 events since then, where we involve the whole community. We have a structure. I'm able to bring the mastermind members in to serve in that, which they love, because one of the things they wanted more of is an opportunity to be a mentor to other people. And now for the next year, we have a whole calendar of every month. We know what the theme of the month is in the mastermind. And then we've created events in the whole community that tie to that. And
yes,
I would have never known this was even a thing. But I asked the question, I did this group interview, And then I dug a little deeper with individual people that said something. I'm like, can you tell me more about that? Because like that's really interesting. And just being curious and being open to the feedback opened up like immense value that I think if we re-recorded this in a year or two, I'd be like, that was a lighthouse moment. That was like a pivotal moment in this whole company. And it came from one, 45-minute conversation with this small group. So I'd say that as an encouragement to people. I was a little scared to do that. I'm like, what if they say I suck? What if
the ego kicks in? Yeah, exactly.
The ego kicked in for sure, but I pushed through that, and I'm like, just like you said, asking the girl, I'm like, why didn't I do this sooner? Like, this is so good. So that's awesome, Karl. Well, thank you for being a friend to me and having me on your podcast and you being here to share your wisdom. It's amazing. So yeah, tell us more about how people can go deeper with you if they need this help. They want to have a call with you or whatever your process is for helping people. Like what's the next best step if people are like, I like Karl and I need more Karl in my life. I need some more systems in my business.
Yeah. So you can go to systematicleader.co. And that basically is my website. And if you go to systematicleader.co/guides, I got one of them is the 30 best interview questions to ask customers. So it's one of the best things that I think people can use. And I have a podcast called Systematic Leader. And but the idea of working with me is just reach out. Message me, call me, email me, Karl with a K at systematicleader.co. And it starts with an assessment. We kind of break everything down, understand where that friction is. And then we start to look at, okay, how can we put flywheel processes in place and then iterate on them? That's the key. Is it's not going to work great right away, but then once you start iterating on it, that's when it really starts to move for you, and that's when the magic happens.
That's awesome. Yeah. So if you're sitting here thinking, man, I do need to do more of this, and I know that I'm going to like quit listening to this and I'm going to forget tomorrow, I'm going to be like, yeah, I need to do that later. Don't do that. Like go to systematicleader.co/guides. At the very least, get some of these resources that Karl gives for free. I think the interview questions that will really open people's eyes into like, oh my gosh, I hadn't thought I should be asking this in my onboarding or this to my clients or my team members. And then, yeah, if you really want to make a decision to improve your own systems, go have a call with Karl and see how he can help you so that you have this partner in this. Because if you're like me, it was only through committing to investing some time, money, and energy in this and finding the who loves this stuff, because I don't, and that unlocked like so much for me. And so, Karl, I'm super grateful for you. I hope everyone goes to systematicleader.co, checks out what you have to offer, and books a call and gets to know you and get to know more about like how you can be a partner to them in their business and build some really, really powerful systems and build a flywheel effect in their business. And they don't have to do it themselves. They have a Karl in their life to do it with them. Thanks for being here, man. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. I had a great time.